Oh my gosh, my sound has done something really weird. I don't want to be bad for your music. Can you hear me? Yeah, I wonder what this sound is. And what about, okay, sorry about that. I don't know what that was. Let's see. I'm going to continue on with the music. And where was that? Somewhere. Here we go. Continuing on. Oh, technology, man. Some interesting technology today. Hello, my guest is Tom Luer. Hi, Tom.
Howdy. Thanks for having me, Cathy.
Thanks for being on, man. So Tom Luer, I've always enjoyed Tom's playing. And he said that he used to come into my jam session, which I honestly don't remember, but you can't really blame me for that because that lasted 7 years and it was every week and so many people came in. It was a great hang. I remember that.
Seen a ton of people come through there. I can't remember who it was who like first invited me to or told me about it. Was either I'm sure it was either Kim Richmond or Billy Kerr, one of the two of them.
It may have been Billy because Billy, it was kind of his non-gig that he showed up for every week.
It was probably Billy because I was, like I was sitting in with the union bands from the day that I got here, basically, and met him early on, like doing, half of those bands he was playing in at that time. This is like 16 years ago, so
Yeah.
probably Billy.
Yeah, he was basically a band member. He played every Wednesday. And yeah, it's really great.
Well, I always dug number one his playing, but also number two, he was always just really nice to me. He's
Totally
very
nice,
friendly, and
yeah,
always very cool. Like it's nice when people are cool to you. So
it is, isn't it? Surprise!
Well,
yeah,
some people have different ideas of what cool is. I guess acting cool.
True. It's true. I know. Actually, last night there was this event that I have to mention it a little bit just because of the timing, because it happened last night. But so this a guy who's a doctor and kind of he's in love with jazz and singing, and he goes around, he takes classes and he goes and sits in, and jams and stuff. Jerome Pittman is his name. And so he got this idea. I'd have to ask him like a little bit more directly about it, but he got this idea to start an event, an award event for jazz excellence. And he started with who he knew, which of course was mostly singers, and there were like 13 people there who were being honored. Well, 12 being honored. One woman who was totally amazing. Lana Los Angeles is her name. She's a spoken word person, totally gorgeous, uh, and incredibly gifted with speaking and, pertinent and everything. Anyway, she was not one of the ones being honored, but all of us who had had jam sessions that he had attended, he started there. And the award, it was an incredible event. It was beautifully run and very elegant, but it was at Vitello's and it was totally packed, and you could really feel the community. It was everybody, I'd say 90% of the people knew each other and had been, like even from the old jam days, I mean, because, you live here long enough. It's like, hundreds of people, and there have been almost hundreds of lifetimes that we've had, like that period of time that we were just talking about was a real solid period of time, that like you had just gotten to town, right?
It was 2005, that summer of 2005.
And so, yeah, so I can just imagine, but you can tell me more. But you came to town. Why did you come to town, first of all?
Well, I ended up here after I was in grad school at North Texas.
Oh, okay.
I didn't finish my degree there. I never intended to, but I was there under the guise of starting my doctorate, and it was a pit stop for me in a moment in my life when I was trying to decide whether I was going to go east or west, meaning
Okay. Yeah.
New York or Los Angeles.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I had sort of kind of come to that, that decision a little later than maybe some folks, and so it's like I thought, well, it'd be good to go to North Texas and get surrounded by like all these young, great musicians, saxophonists who were hungry, which was a good thing. I mean, I think there was something like 77 saxophone players who auditioned for the jazz bands that first semester.
Wow.
So it was a sea of saxophones, but I thought it'd be kind of inspirational and stuff. But by the time I ended up staying in Texas for 3 years, and by the time I left, I just felt like New York seemed like a little bit of a younger musician, because you gotta be willing to go out there, live in a closet, work some sort of a day job or something, stay up till 4 a.m. hitting the sessions and stuff. And I just didn't feel like it was where I was headed. I was a little bit more interested in just kind of working in music in general and not necessarily being just a like dedicated full-time jazz musician. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's how I made my way out here. And yeah, so in the summer of 2005, I landed June of that summer out here.
Yeah. I totally understand that thing about the New York thing. It's definitely a decision when you see your friends and they're on both coasts and the lifestyle. I totally understand that. I had a friend, she and I were very kind of close along growing up and singing wise. She moved to New York, and I almost moved to New York. Actually, it was my first husband who stopped me from going to New York, but I saw how we both developed, and it was interesting watching how the East and the West Coast develop different things in you. I got real good at creating gigs and venues and community. Although maybe I would have been good in New York like that, but I think when I think of New York, it's much more survival, stressful, in New York.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I'm still very much romanticized by the idea, and whenever I visit New York, I get completely consumed by that energy and just love it. But I think at that point I had sort of figured out that as passionate as I am about playing jazz, it wasn't the only thing I needed to do to be happy. I just wanted to. I had come from, before Texas, like basically teaching full time in really a small town in Kansas at a university there, and had figured out that's not what I want to do. I don't want to spend all my time not playing gigs and only teaching, basically, So,
Yeah.
but I also had kind of figured out that I just wanted to have a career in music. I was willing
Yeah.
to do other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
this seemed like the better option, you know?
Yeah. So when you got to LA, was there like a kind of a, would you say there was like a little lifetime that happened for a few years and where you were really involved in certain particular things?
I mean, yeah, when I first got here, first of all, I didn't know anybody. I mean, I had a couple of friends who were working like they weren't working performers. They were working for this company M Audio.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So like in sales and they were reps or something like that. You know, so one of my friends, I stayed with he and his wife in Pasadena, and I was there just for the summer until I had other friends who moved from Texas join me out here, and we all got a house together in Eagle Rock. But yeah, that period of time, it was like I dove in as hard as I could, trying to meet people for about 3 months, and then I ran out of money, and then I had to get a job, you know. And for about a year, I worked a couple of various jobs until I was doing enough. You know, like I'd been added as an adjunct at Cal Poly, and and then was kind of, you know, doing some casuals and other gigs that I was just doing just enough that I didn't need to work that day job anymore, you know.
Yeah.
So that first summer was pretty intense because I'd saved up enough where I could not have to get the job right away, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was trying to hit all the jam sessions, but I had heard, you know, from friends and from people at North Texas that there was still like a big band rehearsal scene at the Union. And so I remember getting here like on a Monday afternoon, and Tuesday morning I threw every horn I owned in the trunk and drove down to Hollywood. And this is kind of a fun story for me anyway. I'll tell this one. I got there, and it was I don't think the outbuilding had been built yet quite that summer. That was under construction.
Yeah.
Next year. So Steve Huffstetter's band was rehearsing downstairs in the basement.
Jeez.
And it was the only band that was rehearsing that day. And so I walked in. I didn't carry any horns in with me. I just walked in, and I knew that actually, I don't know if I knew that my friend Pete was playing in the trumpet section. I don't know if you ever came across Pete DeSiena, but
No.
he came out here a couple years before me from North Texas, and now he's moved to the East Coast with his family. But great, fantastic, you know, lead trumpet player. And anyway, so I saw him in the trumpet section, and we knew each other because he was another North Texas grad who we did not go to school together, but he'd come back a few times. We met each other in gigs, and so I waved at him, and he waved at me, and Steve saw that, you know, that. And he's like, "What do you play?" I said, "I play saxophone." "You got a tenor with you?" "Yeah, I got a tenor." Go get it. Because somebody had no-showed in the sax section and hadn't sent a sub. So there I am,
Wow.
first morning in Los Angeles, and I'm sitting in with Steve Huffstetter's band playing the jazz tenor chair, and it was incredible. I remember, like, you know, I was terrified. I was terrified. I was almost like I couldn't even look around because, you know, and I didn't. I knew everybody's names out here, but I didn't necessarily know people's faces.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't know who was who, but he said their name. I'd be like, "Oh my god!" So we sit that he kicks off the first chart, and this trumpet solo starts happening in the back. You know, after the first chorus is up, and I was like, "That has to be Bobby Shue," and it was Bobby Shue sitting back there. Anyway, so he asked me to come back like the next, you know, month and a half or something to cover, you know, a chair in the section, whatever. And I said, "Of course, I'll gladly do that." And then the next week I come in, and again, terrified, sit down at the other end of the section. I'm putting my stuff together, just trying to be quiet. And I hear this other tenor start making sound. And I'm like, "Oh my God, Pete Chrisley was on the other end of the section." Baptism by fire into the LA big band scene.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. That was a real interesting road you traveled, man.
I've been all over the place. I mean, I'm from Wisconsin originally, you know, but I spent a couple years in Minneapolis. I went back to Wisconsin, finished up school there out of a totally kind of a weird, kind of sort of strange occurrence. I ended up doing a master's degree at Southern Mississippi. If you would have ever told me in my life I was going to live in Mississippi, I would have laughed very heartily, you know, and I'm having a great time there. And then I got the heck out of there, and teaching gig at a Mennonite college in north of Wichita, Kansas.
Wow.
And that whole other trip, and I was there for 3 years, and then I was North Texas, and finally here. So I've kind of just zigzagged all around the Midwest until I got my way out here.
Interesting. Yeah. So it sounds like you may not have really desired to, I mean, now anyway, live in New York. I mean, even though you romanticize it, it's still the living part is, we know, is difficult.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also there was a part, well, certainly when I was younger, I never even thought about the possibility that maybe I could move someplace like New York or even Los Angeles until I was in my 30s, because when I was young, I was super green from a small rural town in Wisconsin, and I thought, like moving to a place like New York as a musician was what other people did. You don't come from like a town of 10,000 people on a river in Wisconsin and end up like New York or something. I mean, people do all the time, but I didn't.
Right.
My family had no experience with that. They're all from that area, and I have amazing family, but they're just, they're from that town. They didn't go anywhere. They didn't go to school. They weren't musicians. They weren't really like, imparting a lot of knowledge on me that way. So yeah, I thought, well, yeah, that's what other people do. They, or I can't do that. Yeah, I can, but by the time I figured that out, I was like, yeah, but I'm not ready for that.
That's funny. Hey, you'll love this in relationship to what you just said. My friend Roland Askeruns is on. He said, I was reading his bio. It's amazing how much he's accomplished for such a young person.
Oh, well, I'm not that young anymore.
I like that. See?
Thank you. I appreciate that, Roland, but I'm just a few years shy of 50 now. So I've been doing.
Hey, get out of there. Somebody's like, okay.
Everybody know you're doing a show right
now?
now?
Man, come on. I'm doing a show. Okay. So yeah. So yeah. Well, I've talked about this before. I mean, I happen to really love tenor. I mean, I love good alto players too. Like you spoke of Kim Richmond before. I mean, I think Kim Richmond is like one of the best alto players I've ever heard, But I think it's interesting what makes a good musician, and I'd like to talk about that more, and also maybe even a little more towards horn players, or sax players, and specifically. I mean, do I love the sound of tenor because my dad played tenor mostly? Do I love that because of that? Or do I just love the tenor? You know what I mean? It's just, or do I love certain tenor? I know who I love. Actually, your sound is, I love your sound. It's beautiful. And your ideas, your musical ideas, just very, very tasty, really good, So what do you think goes into that? What do you think makes a player good in your estimation, just listening to a player? When you listen to somebody you like, you probably had some heroes as you were growing up, like some of the older, the veteran people. But what did you like about them, and what do you think? I know this is a bunch of questions in one, but this is the road, that I want to travel on.
Yeah. I think it was, now that I can look back on it, with some perspective, I think it probably was always to a certain degree about sound, because I didn't really, as a young player, I felt like I really didn't understand the language of jazz. It took me a long time. I consider myself, quite frankly, a late bloomer. I mean, like where a lot of my friends were playing really great in college, I feel like I wasn't really getting stuff together until after I left grad school, after Southern Miss. That's where I kind of was shown a lot of stuff. But so I wasn't really like, I appreciated and knew when a player was really like, technically phenomenal, but if they didn't have a sound that resonated with me, then I started to sort of, check out a little bit, and I was an alto player primarily until I was in my late 20s, where I started to really kind of dabble with tenor more. So my first loves were like Cannonball Adderley.
Oh yeah.
There was like not only this sound, but this sort of like element of joy in his playing,
Yeah.
and Sonny Stitt, of course. And as I got a little more experience, Kenny Garrett,
Uh-huh.
because for me, his sound just had this extra kind of, could just grab a hold of you. I saw him play live once too, and it really impacted me. Like had never really seen somebody do that,
Yeah.
and then early on too, it was Michael Brecker.
Yeah.
Those were the kind of the people who arguably they all have just like these phenomenal and unique and distinct but phenomenal sounds.
Hmm. Yeah.
Top of that, over time, I definitely adopted more heroes. I really was a big fan of Train, and Chris Potter by the mid '90s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Potter, but there have been a lot of others. I mean, I tried to be a student of the music. I tried to listen to all those great players. Hank Mobley was another one that really I felt like influenced me, and Dexter Gordon eventually.
Dexter. Love Dexter.
And only in like recent years was I really, I think I had a conversation with Bob Shepard once about his admiration for Stanley Turrentine, who I had not really checked out much, a little bit, and so then I started listening to Stanley Turrentine, and I'm kind of a Stanley Turrentine nut, so in addition to all these other great players. But I think for me, it just seemed to be about sound, and I also am a product of, academia, where a lot of what we talk about is sound with great teachers, I think, so I had both jazz professors and classical saxophone professors who were all about great sound. And so it just became, for me, something I'm still trying to, as a student of the instrument and music, I'll continue to work on my sound until the day I die. But for me, I feel like I'm really moved when I hear somebody with a great sound that really just, kind of.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because for a singer, I'm always working on my sound too, of course. But part of my sound is just the way my body is built. I can produce a tone the same way somebody else can, but they'll sound totally different than me. So for sax, I mean, I know the horn makes some kind of a subtle difference, whatever horn you have, the reed, and the mouthpiece, I've heard that. And I would assume the way and the amount of your breath going through. But what is it, the person and their communication? Is that actually what makes the different sound for a sax player?
I mean, you're sort of like trying to crack the mystery that we all are on some level, I mean, I think that a person's physiology, just like a singer, though, does, come into play here, because, our tone and our center of intonation on a saxophone is also being controlled by what we refer to as the voicing, which is actually the shape of the back of our oral cavity. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So a person's own natural resting physiology can also impact the tone, I think.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry to be so nerdy about this, but I've never actually talked about this with a horn player. So how does that, is it the amount of air that's going through, or the wave of the air going through? What is it?
Yeah, well, it's like, you can, if just like singing, when you think about like the syllables or sounds like ah or aw,
Yeah.
aw, you get really open.
Yep.
And of course that helps you sing lower.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then you raise the back of your tongue to more like E or E, and that helps you sing higher, essentially. I mean, that's a really simplified version of it, because I'm not a singer.
Yes.
But that affects the intonation and can also affect the sound on the saxophone as well.
Okay, wait a minute.
Sure.
Second nerd question. So, I'm just so intrigued because I think I always think of the embouchure
Mhm.
and the reed as the tuner, you know, like being in tune, sharp, flat, whatever,
Well,
for the horn.
it can be, but technically, like, there's depending on the design of the mouthpiece, there's a sort of like sweet spot on the neck where most of us should play relatively in tune in that area. It's like sort of a gray zone, but it's a relative area. And then if your embouchure is working right, which would basically mean it has a sort of like relatively even distribution of ceiling power. I don't. With my
Yeah,
students, I try to resist the word pressure, but it is, tension.
feeling power is good. I like that. Yeah.
Ceiling power, yeah. So then, if that's working right, uh, then basically you micro tune with the oral cavity and then the back of your tongue.
I'm so blown away by that. I'm going to be thinking about that. That
I
is so interesting.
This is only great information that's been imparted upon me by either like books by the great classical saxophone maestro Donald Cinta, who wrote this book called Voicings, decades and decades and decades ago,
Wow.
which is all about that. But also for myself personally, it was Bob Shepard who uh, took a lot of time and kind of really broke a lot of that down for me, which for him probably came by way of other East Coast guys who studied with Joe Allard, or I can't remember if Shep spent much time with Joe Allard or not, but he probably also talked about that a lot. Would have been a contemporary of Donald Cinta. Yeah, it's not. I'm definitely don't want to mislead anybody into thinking I'm sort of like talking about something that I've spent a lot of time inventing, or it's just that's the information that's been bestowed upon me, and I'm trying to teach that to my students more effectively all the time. But yeah, I mean, the acoustics of the saxophone are that if you're doing all those things right, if you don't voice properly like a singer, then you'll be more out of tune than in tune.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna be thinking about that a lot because I'm I'm very much into practice that where I'm trying to get my body balanced, and it's been out of balance for a while, basically because I don't think it's because I'm getting older. I think it's just because I have this chronic cough that's limited my breathing. It's kind of made my body a little tight and holding back because I don't want to cough. And so, anyway, make a long story short, I've just been studying for a few years and trying to work on that balance and get my tone free, healthy, in the right spot. And it's just fascinating to hear that. Like I said, I never heard that. Never heard that a horn player. And it's funny because I remember talking to Shep and he was telling me how much he was into tone, but we never got into that particular thing. So that's really interesting to me.
Well, and he's definitely a tone guy. And when I moved here, I had a list of about 5 saxophonists who I was determined to hear play and try to get to know, and he was at the top of that list. Partly because his playing for me, his. I know sometimes people talk. I was just having a conversation with someone about this recently, but in like West Coast versus East Coast playing, and I never really understood that there was. I still don't believe there should be a thing. I just thought that we were all trying to aspire to sound like all these great players who came mostly out of New York. So,
Yeah.
but I understood that there was a sort of perceived difference when I got out here. But for me, like when I listened to Shep play, to me that sounded like it was coming out of the same wheelhouse as all these other tenor heroes of mine that included Jerry Bergonzi and Bob Mincer and Michael Brecker and Bob Bergeron.
Yeah.
That all
Yeah.
that's Shep's playing to me. So I was like, I want to. If I sound like anybody out here, I want to sound like that guy. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, he and Ralph Moore, so
Yeah.
I guess that's sort of a New York East Coast kind of a vibe that they've brought with them out here. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so Shep's the cat,
Yeah. I know.
I've never met anybody quite honestly. I don't think I've ever like stood in a room with somebody who I felt like knew that much about the instrument and playing the instrument.
Yeah.
Like another next level. So I feel very, very, very fortunate that he's been able to just sort of like, we've gotten to be pretty good buddies, over the years from like the playing in the orchestra and other things together. So I'd say we're friends now, and I appreciate that he's so willing to just like share all that information, with me, and he's always willing to. So thank you, Shep. If you're
There you go, Shep, man. Let's see. Roland said, and he said, you are young to a 75-year-old man, which that's what he is. He said he's just curious if you're familiar with Gato Barbieri, and what do you think of his sound? Because to him, it sounds consistently overblown.
Well, I just think that Gato has a more commercial concept happening, that affects.
Yeah.
But also sometimes I think that the era in which musicians come up can kind of also affect, their sound, and some people keep that sound, or some players might change it and alter it over their lives. But like for me, Gato seems like someone who also came up at the same time as the fusion era was happening, where people were playing with a lot of really amplified electric instruments and stuff, and that would make it that might it like there are equipment choices like mouthpieces that can help facilitate making those things. Not every saxophone mouthpiece is the same, and some make it really easier to play brighter and louder to fit in with the vibe of those kinds of instruments. If I was transported back in time and I was playing with Weather Report or Herbie's Electric Band, or even a more contemporary group like Spyro Gyra or something like that, I might make different mouthpiece choices to help facilitate getting that kind of a sound. So I love Gato's sound. It's completely appropriate for what he does on his thing,
Yeah.
Cool. Thank goodness there's room for a really wide range. I forgot to say that one of my first saxophone loves was David Sanborn, which is
yeah,
very much sort of in the kind of brighter
definitely.
wheelhouse, but come on. I mean, man, come on,
Wonderful sound.
Yeah. So yeah, and and it's cool that not everybody's sound has to be for you. You know what I mean? Like it's okay. It's okay. I don't have to like everybody's sound. But I can also appreciate them despite that.
Yeah.
I could name probably a whole bunch of players who I'd rather not sound like, but it doesn't diminish my respect for what they've done and for their place in music. Thank goodness again that there's a kind of a wide swath, of acceptable sound in this music, because if everything sounded the same, it would be pretty boring, I guess.
Yeah. I had a friend, I'm guessing you might not have run into him. 1970. Oh gosh, I just can't remember years and stuff. You probably didn't run into him. Anyway, English alto player named Andy Mcintosh. And
that name is familiar.
You might know his name, but he let's see. So when he was much younger, he was in Maynard Ferguson's band, and he was like the lead alto player. So that was definitely that sound. But he had also grown up. His dad was the kind of the lead alto player in the London scene. That kind of it was the older, but it was still a kind of edgy, and they both loved his name just left my head. The guy you mentioned before, Cannonball, right? They loved Cannonball, and Andy really, you could hear his appreciation for Cannonball, but God, there were some beautiful moments. In fact, I should just send you something. I'm going to make a note,
Right.
Andy to Tom, because he lived here for a while. And like he played with Louis Belson's band, Pete Chrisley, all those guys. And then he moved back to London, and he knew a lot of people in London, so they played a lot over there. But he he played with the Metropole. He had a date, you know, supporting him, and it really was, for me, the height of what I've heard him do. Just beautiful, you know, the tone and his ideas, and but that tone, that edgy kind of tone. And also, I remember him talking about, well, there was one mouthpiece that him and Roger Newman fought over. And, but also, I remember him telling me about the intonation of the alto, you know, and how it really varied for people's choices, you know. Like some people liked to hear, you know, if this was the note, you know, then some people really liked to play it here, you know, as opposed to right there, you know. So, um, yeah, I thought that was interesting. You know, I mean, intonation is such a, it's kind of a personal
Well,
choice, you
it
know.
is, you know, and I think it's something that I've sort of come to feel about intonation in jazz is that, I mean, of course, you know, we're all trying to play in tune and blend well with one another and all that kind of stuff, but also still though, like the idea of, you know, like there's room for variations on intonation, I hope, you know, because it's a very sort of European concept to give a music, to place on a music that isn't inherently European. It's like, you know, sometimes I play, you know, I've heard people criticize John Coltrane because he played sharp. I don't care. That's fine with me, you know. Oh, this isn't. We're not playing Tchaikovsky here, you know. Something different, and so that's cool, you know. But yeah, I think that I think, you know, like there was a period of time there where people just gravitated towards brighter sounds, and part of it is, you know, I think based upon who kind of gets popular and for what reasons. And as a saxophonist, I'm probably sort of like just a little bit more, you know, acutely aware of this sort of stuff than maybe, you know, just kind of, you know, general jazz musicians or fans might be. But, you know, like sometimes you know, sometimes players will embrace that for a minute and then depart from it. You know, again, two more of my heroes, Bob Berg and Dick Oates, I feel like had that real incredibly kind of pointed, direct sounds on their respective families of the saxophone family in the 70s. I mean, when you listen to Dick Oates play with the Mel Lewis Orchestra, sometimes his sound is just like, it's like David Sanborn almost, you know, but still gorgeous. But I don't think Dick sounds like that now. I think it's a little bit more organic, kind of a little bit darker sound than I've never studied with Dick. I haven't been around him much. I've heard him play live a few times, and he was a guest at North Texas when I was a student there. So I did hear him, and in that moment, I remember thinking, yeah, that's not the same quite sound that I feel like I was listening to on those records of the Vanguard Orchestra. And the same with Bob Berg. Now, Bob always had a real kind of fiery and kind of aggressive and a little bit on the brighter side sound, but you know, by the time in the latter years of his life, he wasn't sounding like he did when he was playing like with Tom Harrell or on his own early New Birth record, or even like the Cedar Walton Eastern Rebellion stuff, where he would have this really just like theme sound. He kind of tempered that later on, and then, you know, you look at, like, you know, for most of the 80s and 90s, everybody was trying to sound like Michael Brecker. But then when Mark Turner came along and kind of reignited this lineage of Warren Marsh, all of a sudden everybody wants to play dark again. And now if you look at some of the biggest names like Melissa Aldana and her contemporaries, they're all sounding much darker like Mark Turner. They're not doing this real bright, you know, kind of thing that was, you know, what inspired Mike Brecker and some of those other players back then. So things kind of go in waves. You know, at some point it's probably going to come back around, and who knows? But it's part of it. It is like I think a sort of like ebb and flow of who gets popular at one moment, and maybe everybody looks at the history of their instrument in this music a similar way. I don't know. Probably.
Yeah. What do you think of Wayne Shorter?
Oh gosh, one of the best, one of the best. A sound. I'm not really searching for my own personal playing, but definitely an influence on my playing. And as a composer, man, totally in love, you know,
Mm.
like one of the best. But I think, you know, like uh his improvising was like one of a kind, so unique. And actually, you know, as a grad student at Southern Mississippi, I had a chance to hang out with Bob Burke for a few days because I was driving him around for like 4 days.
Cool.
You know,
It's a good gig.
I'd go to the hotel early and sit there for 45 minutes outside the door just listening to him practice, you know, and then I would ask him some questions and stuff. I didn't know anything about the saxophone at that time. So, but he was happy because as soon as I picked him up at the airport, I knew where to find him American Spirit cigarettes. And then we were like, you know, buddies. So, because this was in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. You weren't sure if you could get American Spirits in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. But anyway, so, but I remember him saying to me, I think Wayne Shorter is the poet of jazz.
Huh.
And I thought, well, even as less experienced as I was in that moment, I really appreciated that take on it. I was like, yeah, you're right, man. This guy is like a real poet. He's really saying something personal and unique. And so I absolutely love Wayne Shorter. Love. And some of the music on I should say all. I mean, who am I to judge anyway? But like, talk about some of the most like amazing music recorded even up until now. This guy's still doing it, and I have so much respect for Wayne. What a career, what a
Yeah.
artist.
Yeah.
I know I could go on and on about it because
I know.
I feel like, you know, like Speak No Evil is one of the best records ever recorded.
Yeah.
Like this communication going on between all those band members. That's like, you know, it's like, you know, they didn't rehearse those moments. It's just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
we all dream of as improvisers, I think, trying to get to that place where we're in that moment and we're having this chamber ensemble, you know, everybody's part of the
Yeah.
conversation, and it's not just blowing over a rhythm section, and we're all trying to get there, and it just seems so effortless for those guys. It was just, yeah, it's just beautiful. Oh gosh, I could go on and on.
You know, speaking of that, actually, you just kind of stirred up my mind for another subject, which is, and it's not, I'm not going to ask you what you like best because that's stupid, but there are these different experiences that we can create and be part of. One of what you just spoke of, you know, you get together with people, and it's interesting what happens. You can just, I don't know if it's the music you pick or you don't pick, or just the personalities involved. But there's some bands that you get together, or musicians you get together with, that have that quality that you just spoke of. It's like, it's in the moment, and it's this level of comfort, you know, and communication that is whatever it is. You know, you don't have to describe exactly what it is. And then there's something like Monkestra, for instance, you know, which has particular charts written. It's John Beasley's, you know, dream and imagination written down and played by wonderful players who definitely love that other thing I was talking about. They love the being in the moment and creating, and to some extent that happens in that band, but still you are playing the music, right? And yeah, it's just it's really interesting to have all of that as different layers in what we're doing, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. The Monkestrucks, especially, you know, I think that John cultivates that
Yeah. Yeah.
idea of communication, you know, because he kind of in some ways writes that into his arrangements, but he's also playing with the band and he plays that way. And he's an incredibly gifted improviser, and original and unique,
Yeah.
but also with like this like tremendous patience, you know, like he's just willing to wait for other people to chime in and participate in that moment, you know. And so,
Yeah.
and I think that everybody in the band has just sort of like totally bought into it, like we're
Uh-huh.
like, if that's what you want us to do, then we're just going to go after it. Even though he also, I think, hires people that he knows are going to be feeling that thing too. So it's kind of like this kind of collective thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's very special. And
Okay, I just want to say one name.
okay.
Ryan Dragon.
Oh man.
Well, the last time I saw you guys, which probably was the last gig that you guys had at the Sam First place in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Ryan Dragon, man. I saw Shep and Keith. They were laughing, man. They were just getting such a kick out of it. I mean, Ryan Dragon is he's such an interesting player. He reminds me of he reminds me of Clay Jenkins.
Mm.
They have this world that they look into or they're part of that's very quirky and very high level musicians, and but it's such an interesting place they're coming from.
Yeah. I love Ryan's playing, and to me, he's one of those great improvisers that has no problem sort of like straying off the path further than anybody else. His internal GPS is so great that he knows he's going to get back to it. You know what I mean? And Clay's the same way. It's like they can just be like, okay, we're going to walk through this forest here. But actually, we're going to run. Stay on the path and not hit any trees, but those guys can run full tilt through the forest and not hit any trees. It's like it's so amazingly creative. I sit there and when I hear people like Ryan play, I'm like dreaming to myself, well, someday maybe you can be that creative. You're right, and also, but there's just this great sort of like really seriousness and artistic thing happening with someone like Ryan, but there's also still this hint of a sense of humor in there that he brings to it, that that even if it's sometimes like it might be perceived by some people as pretty out, it still has enough of something to connect with you in there, though. You're still like you're enthralled by it because he maybe throws in that sense of humor part of it or something to you. He finds a way to connect with the that's really like that's what we're all trying to get to, I think.
Yeah, I think he's even more comical than Clay. Clay is not as comical. But one time, I have to just tell you this. So I was booking a place called Bar Fedora downtown across from Disney Hall. And I booked Ryan and Joey Sellers. Have you ever seen that group?
No, but I know the group.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, you can see it. People watching can see it on YouTube, but it's crazy. And and Joey said, "Are you sure you want to book our group in there?" Because it was just the duo, right? And I said, "Yeah." So not many people in the audience. Probably more people who are into the duo or down in Orange County, and but there was this cute couple who had come in because he wanted to show her what jazz was. So I came over and I said, I just want to tell you, this is not typical jazz. This is very unusual. And they said, okay. And they sat through not only the first set, but they stayed the second set too. I couldn't believe it because, Ryan and Joey do some serious stuff, some like, what's that famous classical piece that I forget the name of it. It's, super famous. They play the whole thing gorgeously. And then there are moments when Ryan comes out in a Speedo and a wrestling mask and a little shirt. And that's how he's playing. And they're, you know what I mean? It's pretty interesting. So, but that's the humor. It's kind of a dark humor, but it's humor.
But also, though, like what they're doing musically, a lot of what they're doing can only be done on the trombone. So, like, shouldn't we all want to hear that?
Yeah.
I want to hear that because if if it's something that unique and you can only hear it on the trombone, and in some ways that setting is the best place for it, we should all just want to hear that anyway. It doesn't matter if it's swinging or something, it's like, that's cool. I like that.
They're
Oh,
great. They're great, man. And then Clay, he's just he was on, I think he was on my first recording. Yeah, he was. Years and years and years and years ago, 78 or something, or I don't know when I first recorded that. No, it would probably be like more like 82, something like that. But anyway, I heard him recently. I don't know if you knew the bass player Bob Bowman. Do you know that name?
I know Bob is Kansas City guy.
Yeah, yeah. He lived here for, a good chunk of time. That's how I knew him. But he came into town a few months ago, and we had to record, but they had also a outdoor house concert too. And so in the band was him, and I keep forgetting who the drummer is. Come on. I just cannot recall his name. It's a guy who's been here forever, and yeah. Anyway, straight ahead, great drummer. And they've been friends for years and years. And then Josh Nelson on the piano, and Bob and he apparently met at some concert and were put together by the concert master person, and it was love at first sight. Larry Kuntz, and then Shep and Clay Jenkins. It was the most beautiful music. And there was this one thing, I think it was Larry's tune, and Clay took a solo that just made me want to lie down and die. It was just so amazing. If you just, if you're open enough to just stay with his viewpoint, it's just incredible, just gorgeous. And like you said, he is outside, but he's very smart and firm in that,
Yeah, I mean, playing outside is ultimately like the heaviest thing you can do, because when you're doing it right, you know exactly what you're doing,
Yeah.
But I've been fortunate to have played in a few big bands with Clay over the years, and recording sessions and stuff, and I always think to myself that he's the kind of improviser that can make the rest of the band miss their entrance. Because when he plays, everybody is listening, and a lot of times he's just playing some stuff that's so unbelievably creative. All you can do is listen. All you can do is, and there's there's only a certain amount of people who really have that thing going. It's just incredible to hear it.
Yeah.
And especially to be in the room when it happens, because then there's also that energy of everybody else understanding that moment is really special and sort of momentous. It's like we just witnessed something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Witnessed something special.
I'm gonna try and find when Bob Bowman is coming back for the CD release, and I'll send you that information, because yeah, I think you'd enjoy that. And I'm sure the whole band will be
playing drums or something. Joe LaBarbera or Peter?
No, and it's not Steve Schaefer, but somebody like Steve Schaefer. I don't know why. I know who he's married to. He's married to Becky, who used to be married to the Musicians Institute creator, who was he? The guitar player. Do you know who created Musicians Institute?
Are you talking about Ken Poston?
Huh?
Are you talking about Ken Poston?
No. No, it was a guitar player. Yeah, and Pat Hicks, and Becky was his wife, and she was running Musicians Institute in the beginning too, which actually was called GIT at the time, I think. Guitar Institute. Then she married this drummer. I want to say it's Steve somebody. I got to go find his name. Well, I'll find it on the record, or they'll play again. It's one of those guys I've known forever, and I just cannot. It just doesn't get into my head. Well, I think we should play another piece by you. And yeah, I was kind of interested, of course, because I'm a singer, in this singer. I see Andrew Sinowak is there too. Not a bad guitar player, Andrew Sinowak.
Yeah, no, believe me, I know.
And this was where again? This was at
The Wits End.
The Wits End. Yeah, that was just. I think that was the best sound I ever experienced in a club. It was a tiny club, but the sound guy just knew his stuff so great. And this is with Andrew guitar, who's, if you guys don't know who Andrew is, he's an amazing guitar player, extremely versatile, and just it's kind of like Bob Shepard on guitar, right? So great. Andy Langham on piano, Edwin Livingston on bass, and Dan Schnell on drums. And the singer is
Nayana Hawley.
And who is she?
So Nayana, she does a lot of stuff for like television now. Like what's the Voice maybe is the most.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I know she does a lot of Ricky Minor's projects.
Okay.
I met Nayana touring with Queen Latifah way back in 2007. Which John Beasley was the musical director for that tour.
Oh, okay.
She was had just graduated Michigan, but her father is Dorian Hawley, who is a longtime backup singer for like Michael Jackson and others in town here too.
Oh, okay.
Comes out of like a family who's done that. I think she studied jazz at Michigan, but since then, I mean, Nayana's career is just blown up. I mean, after that tour with Queen Latifah, I know she was on the road for a lot of years with Sheryl Crow.
Oh.
And then I heard her before this show, a few months before this, she did like a Nina Simone tribute there at the Wits End, which was out of sight. So I've just like been a big fan of Nayana's, and she was willing to do this show at that time. I still sort of dream of maybe recording this band with her again someday, even though it's been a long time since we did this. But I'll also maybe just say this about my band. This I created this quintet probably back around 2009 and called it Project Popular, and I was interested in really on that idea of taking pop tunes and arranging them for a jazz group in a sort of modern way. And
yeah,
and it was a great experience. I still book the band as that name, but we probably do more originals now. But I still try to use the same, as far as the instrumentalists go. I still try to use the same guys almost all the time when they're available. So this was at a moment where we were probably working a lot more than we are these days, certainly. And this arrangement was, I actually took up a Pearl Jam song. Jeremy is a Seattle grunge rock Pearl Jam, and we recorded this on the one record we did back in 2011. So, but we didn't record it with vocals. This was something I kind of did a few years after the fact, and we came up with this.
Okay, cool. Here we go.
At home drawing pictures of mountain tops with them on top, lemon yellow sun, arms are raised in a V, deadly, it pulls out maroon below. Daddy didn't give attention to the fact that Mama didn't care. King Jeremy the wicked ruled his world below. Jeremy spoke in class today. Jeremy spoke in class today. bit that lady's breast, how could I forget? And he hit me with the surprise left, left my jaw wide open, just like the day, like the day. Daddy give affection, another boy was something mama couldn't get. King Jeremy, the wicked, ruled his world, Jeremy spoke his last word. Jeremy spoke his last
Dan Schnell on the drums back there. Andy Lemon on the keys. Andrew Sinowitz on the guitar back there. Edwin Williamson on the bass.
That's a cute picture of you, by the way. I know guys hate when you say it's a cute, you look cute, but anyway, it is a cute picture.
My friend of my wife's before me, Mike Quain. He's one.
I'm sorry, what did you say? I couldn't hear that.
That photographer is Mike Quain. He's a friend of mine and a friend of my wife's before I met him, and he's just a wonderful photographer.
Yeah, that was really nice. You sounded really great on it. The band sounded great, and she did too. And interesting song. Is that how the song goes as far as like it has these little changes of time?
No, no, it's just a 4/4, kind of rock song,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it was the first song I ever arranged for the band when I had this idea I want to arrange pop songs for the band, but it's not like that's something new or something. I mean, it's been a story of jazz forever, but
Yeah.
modern pop songs, and I just started with a song that I liked when I was a kid, but I would just kind of trying to imagine some ideas, and that idea of turning it into like a bright 3 just sort of resonated with me. But part of the shifts of the meter for me were trying to still include in an acoustic way what the original sounded like in those moments. So if you hear the original Pearl Jam recording, then you'll understand that we used basically their ending without all the distortion, but a more jazz sensibility to get out of it. And there's a few other moments that were,
Yeah.
they're straight from Pearl Jam. But yeah, I mean, I was pretty pleased with the final result. And the key is always hire a band that's better than you are, so that you have to play up their level, which is why I asked all those guys to play my music. And also,
I don't know if they're better than you.
I'm going to argue with that until the day I die.
I mean, I think they're a high level band, but so are you.
Well, thank you. But I heard all of those guys play with different folks before I ever worked with them myself, and maybe, I mean, in the case of, yes, I think by the time I had asked them all to play this music with me, when I started the group in 2009 with the intention of recording, we had started to play together in different situations. But I had heard them play, which was the reason why I wanted to play with them, and I knew what their sensibilities were, and I just thought they would be great for it, and I think I ended up being right. I mean, I
I
swear.
think so too.
I mean,
Yeah, I
there's
think so too.
yeah,
Very
there's nothing
nice.
that goes by when we're playing together where I don't feel like, man, this is right where I'm supposed to be. I just love it. And I think collectively we all kind of got on the scene here at the same, pretty much the same time.
Yeah.
So there's a connection between us there that we all moved out here around the same time, probably within a total of 3-year window or something like that, you know. And so we're all just of a sort of like-mindedness and musically compatible, I hope people think.
Yeah, that's great. By the way, thank you, Dan. The drummer who I was trying to think of was Steve Houghton.
Steve,
I don't know why his last name always kind of goes, "Beep." Yeah.
Yeah, Steve Houghton, he's wonderful. When I was teaching in Kansas, I was hired 1 or 2 years to adjudicate the Wichita Jazz Festival.
Cool.
Still massive at that time, and I remember that at least if I did it more than 1 year, 1 year that I did it, we'd be in that booth on a Friday from 8 a.m. until 1 in the morning, like, except for some, you know, like meal breaks, you know.
Yeah, it kind of starts blending into each other, doesn't it?
So fried by the end of the day. And
Yeah.
Steve was one of the judges, adjudicators, and then it was like me and somebody else who were local. And by
Yeah.
the time it got to be about 7 o'clock, they're saving all the bands like the Central Oklahoma University Band, which is really great, and the North Texas 2 o'clock band plays, and a couple other really great college bands. And we were all just like, Steve, you got to go clinic these bands because we're so fried we don't even know what to say. And he's like, and he was like totally willing. He went down and judged all those bands for like the last 2.5 hours.
Oh God, that's great.
Kind of wrote whatever kind of comments we could think of. We were all so fried, and I know he was too, but he was great. He was such a nice cat. So what a player too.
Yeah, the people don't realize the adjudicators have such a hard job. I've done several vocal, you know, high school, which is mind blowing anyway, but high school vocal festivals, which is a weird blend of show music and, you know, some is show music and some is jazz, and but the weird thing is to me is how much time those kids must have spent putting it together. They're dancing and singing. It's like a show, you know, dancing, singing, outfits, you know. And then I don't know how you handle it, but you know, I have a very high tolerance level. But I discovered that up at the top is a super distaste for people who treat the music badly somehow, you know, and that's just across the board. I have a high tolerance level, but that is one thing that is just over the line. So there was one high school that they had a jazz group and the kids were soloing. A bunch of the kids would solo within the songs. And the teacher had obviously not said a word to how that was done. So they were all terrible. It was just like they were just throwing the spaghetti against the wall, you know. And I kept listening, and I was, of course, you're supposed to say something thoughtful and intelligent because more than one person is probably listening, and you know, something to use. So I had started with my little tape recorder saying something nice or whatever, and then as it went on, I started getting pissed off. So my tone started changing, you know, and finally I literally was ending up going, what are you teaching these kids? You're obviously not teaching these kids anything because they're not. I think that was the last adjudication I did. Because they probably said, well, we're not having her again because, you know, she lost her mind. But wow. And he was the only teacher in the whole thing that actually treated the students like that. It's not that I'm opposed to students not being able to scat, but when you hear that they weren't taught anything about it at all, like not even to be in the key of the song, you know. just hearing, you know.
It's really hard to be it's hard to be a student of the music like we are, and then
Yeah.
function in the role of an adjudicator, especially depending on, like what's the backdrop of that story. Like, for example, like if I go do a college, a festival at a university, but it's all high school bands, well, that's for that university, they're investing a lot of time and money in recruiting. Really, they're kind of
Yeah.
a lot of the students might consider going to that school. So I might think that this director is doing this band a great disservice, but if I maybe come at them too harshly, then they don't come back next year for the festival. They don't pay their whatever hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
Is that band director badmouths that university, and all those kids don't go to that program, and so it's like, and probably people would never think about all these sort of politics that are sort of involved in that, which shouldn't be, which is why I think most of us are sort of like anti-competition in music anyway, but
Yeah.
not going to go away. So do we just like refuse to participate in it, or do we find some way, a diplomatic way, which is really hard to do, to impart some knowledge on them, and that's probably an example of a band director who also had kind of created like a god complex around her in that program, in which they weren't really showing the students a lot about everything that they should about that performance or something, but at the same time the students probably worship that director, so you couldn't say anything that would be taken seriously by the students, because their word is the end, so I mean, I've been in hard situations where, like, I've had to get up and go pull a director aside and give them some real feedback that I wasn't willing to put on an audio recording or something, or willing to say in front of the students. But I would say, look, this has to be different, like we're
I wish you had talked to me about this right before that. I wasn't expecting that, and I wish that's what I had done. I wish I had erased what I had said or whatever, and then gone to talk to him.
I've done it too. I also lost my cool a couple times. I mean, not crazy or something. I just did some things that after the fact I was like, probably just I could have had that conversation with the director and got further with it than sending students, who like whatever, like but when you're listening to it all day long, sometimes it's like fingernails on a chalkboard. Then at some point you kind of break. You're like, like I can't take it, So I've had like kind of strong conversations with directors after the fact where I'll just say, like, you're at a jazz festival and you're not playing jazz, so I'd be happy to email you some some charts that are great for the level of your band, but you're coming to a jazz festival playing pep band music, and that's not what we're here for. And your kids need to know that. So if you need some guidance, I'll be your like advocate. Let me help you out, or your band is playing so out of tune, so you got to do something about it. That's your job as the educator. You got to get them in a direction of intonation. And sometimes it's hard. I mean, I think just as there is in every kind of corner of what we're doing, sometimes in education, there's some folks out there who aren't really equipped with the right tools. Maybe they're in the wrong area of education, and that's just how they landed, and then they just kind of got stuck there or something. But sometimes there's just some folks out there that they're not really passing along really great. Like I did a master class at a middle school. This is a very long time ago, but the kids were playing really out of tune. I mean, the band, all the horns were so out of tune, and I just said, hey, do you guys ever like grab a tuning note from the piano, or get tuned up before you play? And like somebody shouts out, well, our piano's really out of tune. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, maybe if somebody has a tuner, you could just grab a note together, or if one person wants to play a note, and you could all tune up a little bit before, and the better we play in tune, in that respect, the more relaxed we can be, and we'll swing harder and all that kind of stuff. So it's something to think about. And after the masterclass was done, the director took me into his office, and he's like, how dare you talk to my students about intonation? You know how hard it is to do this? We don't have time for that. We don't have time to think about intonation.
Oh my God.
And I was like, amen.
Wow.
I'm not asking you to do anything that everybody else doesn't do already.
Wow.
So,
well, that's an example. I've come not that particular thing, but there was one school that I was teaching at. It was a high school. They wanted to add in a extra, jazz class, after hours and stuff. So we did. And the classical voice teacher was so mad. He didn't want his students in the class, and he just hated that we were doing that class. It's like, I'm not taking anything away from you. This is an extra development, expansion. There's nothing, you don't have to feel threatened.
Right.
Yeah, so
Often do, because again,
they
it's
do.
complex. They've sort of built up this king of the hill within their department, but underneath that, they know that there's somebody out there who knows a lot more about X, Y, or Z than they do, and they're going to get found out. So
Yeah,
ways to not get found out are to make sure that they never hear an adjudicator go after those things.
yeah,
I've had band directors want me to come and listen to their bands and work with their students, and then they'll play music, but they don't want me to say anything. They're like, well, let's just move on to the next one. We want to get a lot of music in today. Well, what am I here for? I'm just listening. You could have sent me a recording or something, but they don't really want the feedback. What I figured out a lot of years ago is that one of the first things I'll say when I walk up to talk to a band is I'll just say, hey, I just want you to keep in mind that music is a subjective thing, and I might ask you to try some things different right now than you do in the regular, and that doesn't mean it's right or wrong or good or bad or etc. I just might have a little bit different idea, and you can choose collectively as a band whether you want to maybe try to incorporate that into your playing. And so I've said nothing bad about the director, and I've left the opportunity open for that director to go, I think that's a good idea. Let's try that, versus me going up and saying, well, you're doing this wrong and you're doing this wrong, because now you sort of like put them in their back against a wall, and they're not going to do what you asked their band to do. Now you're the enemy,
yeah.
So that's a tough, I've had a really hard time with that over the years. And a lot of times not wanting to adjudicate at all because, of some of that other stuff that plays a factor that has nothing to do with just like having a real, honest experience of listening to and communicating with students about what things they can do to be better,
Yeah.
those other things going on. So teaching and adjudicating especially is tough. It's not an easy job,
Because of that, really, because you really need the right attitude and communication skills, because obviously music is not just put your finger here and there. It's so much beyond that.
It's way beyond it. And
Yeah.
like you have to, the challenge is trying to sort of like foster in your students an attitude of wanting to do more than you're showing them,
Yeah.
like they have to. I'm trying to tell my students all the time, like, if you want to be a musician, you got to embrace your curiosity. You've got to be willing to go out there and search out this information without me showing it to you. If you're not doing that outside of this moment right here, this probably isn't the right thing for you, because that's what we do. That's how we operate, and that gets pretty challenging sometimes, when you start to really like think, with them about, is this really right? I mean, are you going to be able to do this? Because, you don't seem like you're not sort of like living and breathing music, but don't we all who want to do this for real and do it well kind of live and breathe music,
Yeah.
So that's tough. And I tell you what, man, teaching in the lockdown and as we're starting to get out of it and be back on campus, is some of the most challenging moments of teaching in my life, because right now I feel like it's not only like just trying to get back to normal, it's like rehabilitating these couple of classes of students. Like, I think we're in a unique situation here at a university where we're getting a class of students who spent their senior year completely online, so in some ways they're like less mature than your average freshman. They didn't get the typical really, like, there's a real kind of energy and momentum to graduating high school, in which there's a lot of fanfare, and there's the senior parties and all that kind of stuff, and you're moving out the door and they're going to college and all that kind of stuff, and that happens with all your friends in the walls of that institution you're leaving. There's a moving on sense from that, And I don't think they got that in the pandemic. I think they're kind of stuck a little bit, and then they didn't really, I think, gather, a lot of them didn't gather a good perspective of what their expectations would be when they got to a place like this, so I feel like right now I'm sort of teaching them to be students again, in addition to trying to teach them content and wanting to deliver the same amount of content that I could 2 years ago, but it's not happening so far.
So interesting. It's very interesting. And yeah, I've been in and out of teaching in institutions, and I mean, teaching is always great. It's, sometimes the institution is problematic, and, sometimes just getting to the building is is problematic. But so now I'm teaching a lot more privates, and also I redid my website to reflect what I think is a strong point for me, which basically is kind of what you're talking about. It's like a more of a spiritual, point of view. And so, and I've really enjoyed the people who are calling from checking out my website, because I know that they know who I am. They're not coming for the voice, or, you know what I mean? They're not coming for that, because that's not what I'm great at. I mean, I can teach technique great, but really my thing is a perspective, and basically how you were talking about it. So yeah, I taught a student recently who was very new, and I told her I told her what she could expect, and what, that it wasn't just a surface vision, it was much deeper. And once she started learning this basic part, this was only the base. Then there was like all these different levels exponentially expanding. And, I wanted her to really understand, do you want that? I think I saw the excitement in her, that she wanted it. But it's hard to say, because sometimes you have a lesson with somebody who seems like that's what they're getting. And then it turns out, I mean, maybe you've put them on a path, maybe you've helped put them on a path, and that's cool. But maybe not. Maybe they looked and they went, oh, no, I don't think so. It's a little too deep. I just really wanted to look at the cover of the book. I didn't really want to open it up and look inside, So, but yeah, teaching, it sounds like that you have had, I don't get the feeling from this conversation that you only taught throughout your career because it was, it supported you. I feel like, listening to you speak, that you really enjoy teaching.
I mean, I do. I've almost always taught in some capacity, even from when I was in high school. I would teach lessons to the middle school kids,
Yeah.
I was a saxophone teacher in our town. It was a small little town. So, the band director said, why don't you go show this middle school kid some stuff, and I would do that. And so I've always had a few students here or there, or worked in a music store and taught lessons there, or had graduate assistantships, so I was teaching while going to school. And I had a lot of really great educators in my life, I mean, from my private saxophone teacher, Greg Keel in Wisconsin, to Robert Baca, the jazz director at UW-Eau Claire, Larry Pinella, and Dr. Larry Guaz, who just retired. He was a classical saxophone professor at Southern Mississippi. Larry's a jazz director there, and even the guys at North Texas. I mean, I just had a lot of really great educators, but they were like of the mentoring kind, the nurturing kind, who I felt like they actually were advocating for me. What a shame, for me to spend my life not advocating for others who are also interested in doing this. And I'm not like an expert, I'm not the world's greatest teacher. I'm not the world's greatest saxophonist, but I do feel a sort of dedication to pass along a lot of this great knowledge that was shared with me for anybody who wants to have it, So yeah, I do enjoy teaching. I really do enjoy participating in it. There are moments that drives me crazy, you know, that you know, when students don't really seem to like take it serious. I find myself having that conversation a lot more often. Maybe it's just my age and where I'm at, you know. There's always that part where it's like, you're just getting old and you're getting I hate to sort of paint a generation any one way or the other, but I just feel I have myself having that conversation a little bit more often though about how hard it is to be a musician, you know, and a music major in school, and the level of dedication and the expectations of you. Yeah, guess what? There's actually there's a greater expectation that you're going to attend your classes as a music major than if you were, you know, maybe in some of the sciences and in a lecture hall full of 250 people, and you can get the notes from the person from the next to you. You're not participating in that, but you know, you can't be missing woodwind fundamentals class where in 4 weeks I got to show you how to play the clarinet well enough to show your students how to do it. You can't miss those classes, you know. You can't be rehearsal. You're like, your part is essential to the band. You can't be missing. But I think a lot of students, you know, are kind of like shocked sometimes now, like, you know, that they have to have that sort of level of dedication, because I don't know that they've had to do that with music until they get here, and it seems to be more of a shock to them now than I've seen in years past.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work doing what we do, right? You know, like the amount of hours you've dedicated to just practicing your instrument. It is. We have done a lot of work in that respect, you know, and it's a wake up call for some folks, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's great to see them really get it and rise to that occasion. Those are the really special ones, you know, like,
yeah,
they got it, you know.
Did you ever contemplate doing anything else for a living? Or do you have hobbies?
And when I was in high school, I sort of imagined myself doing something like, you know, being a lawyer or something like that, but I was never smart enough to do that. So I never really, you know, music kept also sort of like the universe kept throwing music at me in a way that I always sort of understood that, well, I'm doing something with music.
Yeah.
Right now, I think about having a profession of retiring, but that's a long ways away.
A profession of retiring. It's the first time I've actually heard that put like that.
But I you know, like I've been sort of dabbling in sort of minor woodworking kind of things. First of all, I should say that everything I know, I've either, you know, like learned from my dad, who was like, you know, the sort of quintessential rural baby boomer, could do everything from drywall to run electricity to plumbing and change the brakes on your car at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, even now in his mid 70s, he could do all that stuff. So I paid attention to some of that when I was a kid, not enough, but he, you know, over the course of my life, I've seen him, like, you know, build his own shop at home. He's got every saw and router and everything you can imagine. And he's built you know, for the last 30 years, he's built picnic tables for everybody in the neighborhood. He's built coffee tables and hutches for my mom and all this stuff. He's like, you know, the machinist by trade, but he could really be an artisan furniture builder if he wanted to. So I kind of paid attention to some of that. And I also live right next door to who's become a really great friend, who actually has his own furniture building business. His name is Mike O'Connell. He's in Atwater Village. MOC Furniture is his thing. But so he gives me some tips on how to do some stuff. So starting last summer, I you know, with a little more time than when I say last summer, 2020, a little more time because no gigs and stuff, I started to build these like mouthpiece display boards. I started with asking my dad to build one for me, because I just had all these loose mouthpieces laying around, and I thought, well, I'm going to take these out to the college and I'm going to have them on display so my students can try these mouthpieces if they're looking to get a better mouthpiece. They'll you know, have something they can try out, you know. So my dad, he goes, well, give me some dimensions, you know, and of course it looks like it's coming, you know, like from, I don't know, like the Royal Palace or something. So he goes and finds this like gorgeous like olive wood culling board, and then he's got all these perfectly measured dowels in there. It said all the family of saxophone mouthpieces on there. And
wow,
it's art, you know.
Yeah.
And I sat there and stared at this thing for months at my house, and I was like, I can't take this back to campus with me. As a student, I'm gonna keep this one here, but maybe I can build some. So I made some like real kind of basic ones, and then I thought, well, if I can do this, I can build like solid wood flute stands. So I built some alto flute stands.
Oh,
I'm trying to like circle back and kind of restart that. You know, I might have a little side like woodworking thing. I just
cool.
refinished some chairs that I didn't realize were incredibly valuable.
Oh,
I've had them for 20 plus years. They're like Danish Danish cord chairs. Like you know what I'm talking about? It's like the paper cord, Danish paper cord chairs. They're made by a famous maker in the 1950s, and I acquired these chairs from a friend who probably bought them at a yard sale in Texas.
Yeah.
They weren't worth anything back then. They sat out on my patio for years. They got totally dried out.
Oh my God.
All that kind of stuff. And then I just was kind of cleaning them up, and my wife, you know, really loves those chairs, and she was kind of, you know, interested in maybe getting them kind of spruced up a little bit. And so I said, yeah, I think I'd like to do that. And I found that actually one of them still had a readable tag on the bottom. I looked it up, and it turns out, like, you know, people are, you know, spending like $1,000 per chair for these things. It's ridiculous. So now these aren't worth that because they've been totally beaten up by the weather and stuff. But hey, so with my friend next door, Mike, he's like, well, you could try this and this, you know. So I was out there for 3 days, just like hand sanding and hammering cracks together and putting this finish on and stuff. And I did everything. I washed the rope cord seats and got them all cleaned out and everything. They turned out looking pretty good, you know. So I've realized that, you know, I like doing some of that really kind of hands-on sort of non-music stuff to help out the music stuff.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I feel so like over inundated with music between teaching and playing, that it kind of I just kind of need a moment. I gotta, like, let me get my mind on something completely different, because then I can kind of get fresh about it again, you know. And those things have really resonated with me. So
That's cool. Yeah, you need a balance.
yeah.
Yeah.
An Etsy shop someday that I'll sell some trinkets on or something.
I was talking to John Tegmeyer last week, and actually that was what he's been doing too.
So woodworking.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's I should reach out to John about that, because John and I go way back. We got to know each other doing those rehearsals at the Union.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, woodwork, I think, I mean, even I did woodwork in, was it junior high? You know, this is the kind of person I am, the kind of girl I am. So in junior high, we had electives. We had home ec, you know, where all the girls went to cook and stuff. And sewing, woodworking, and metal, and electronics. So I never took the home ec. I took the other ones because home ec was like, I don't want to, you know, yuck. But so I took, and I loved all of those. I loved woodworking. Wow, there was something so beautifully satisfying with working with wood and the machines and putting them together and making something beautiful that was kind of organic, really nice. And the metal, actually, I loved, I guess for the same reason, but of course it's just a different media. And then electronics. I loved electronics. I loved the logicalness of electronics, you know. So, I mean, I never really dove into any of those like much deeper at all, but I just loved those in the beginning. They were just, they just made sense. They were enough something physical to really, you know, again, maybe balance out my body, you know, because the music is so kind of ethereal, right?
Yeah, I think it's just, I think it's healthy, you know, for us to try to balance out our lives a little bit better, you know, than just being totally immersed in music all the time. I mean, it's good for us to get away a little bit as artists and have other interests too, and it probably makes us a little bit more interesting people to talk to.
Probably. What do you do?
Yeah.
Music? Oh, do you have any hobbies? Yeah, music.
my wife,
Yeah.
my wife and I, who she's amazing. We talk about this a lot too. That we're both artists, but we can both go into a room and talk to people about anything. But sometimes we have some of our friends in our circles who really can only talk about what they do, music, or if it's this or that. I don't want. I'd prefer like be able to relate to everybody on some sort of middle ground or something, or know a little bit about
Yeah.
what they're up to. So I try to do.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it? Sometimes I listen to the Alan Alda podcast called Clear and Vivid, which is really cool. He interviews a lot of scientists and then just like friends of his and people who have had, success in various areas. Anyway, it's really nice. As you can imagine, it's very Alan Alda, real natural. And that's why I like listening to them. But he always asks a few questions at the end, which I almost stole from him, but I didn't really want to go there. But sometimes I ask similar questions to people. But one of the questions is, let's see, what is the question? So it's, if you're at a dinner party and how, I haven't listened to it in a while. Well, one question he had was, how do you get someone to stop talking? Which I thought was a really interesting question. But the other question was, you're at a dinner party. How do you start talking to the person next to you who you don't know at all? And that intrigues me. It's like, yeah. I mean, I remember reading many years ago that rich and successful people talk. They if they were sitting with you, they'd talk about you. They'd ask you all kinds of questions about you. They would never allow the conversation to go to them, and not for any reason except they're learning and they're they don't want to talk about themselves or they whatever. But it opens up this communication, and you actually get to know a lot more, and you're connecting with another human being. And apparently they think that's somehow successful, because that's what they do. It's interesting.
It's kind of networking in a way.
Yeah, it's kind of networking. My husband is not a musician. He's but he is, to me, he's been an artist because he did the lighting board operation on the Tonight Show for 20 years. And he lit the bands. He wasn't the lighting director, but he was, the lighting director would say, yeah, throw in some red and blue on this, or, and then Gary would create the look, So I thought it was very artistic and somewhat improvisatory because they did it that day. They didn't plan it way ahead for it, and different things might happen where he'd have to change. But his hobbies are metal detecting and eBay. And he's not a huge jazz fan. He loves rock and roll and blues, and he has like thousands and thousands of records because he's collected them over the years. So he always says that when I get together with my friends, we always talk about jazz. Of course we do, because really most of my friends are jazz people, So yeah, we're going to talk about jazz because we love it, And like you said, it's our life. We love it. It's exciting. Did you hear blah, blah, blah? Oh, I went to see blah, 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 or, oh, I just discovered this, whatever, this new chord. I know I'm 80 years old and you're 90, but look at this new chord. I love guitar players. So, yeah, but I mean, life is interesting, isn't it, Tom?
Like I say, I mean, I'm fortunate that my wife is a artist. I mean, she spent most of her career as a dancer and choreographer, but also acting and as a writer. And when we first started dating, 10 years ago, she was just sort of at that moment where she was transitioning from the stage to something else, and she since then she's been working at a nonprofit in South Central where she started as the dance coordinator and teacher, but now she's chief programs officer there. So she's been moving up through administration and stuff. But she still has her circle of friends who she's known since she was a kid, because she grew up in dance out here. And there's at least we have we have an understanding of that freelance lifestyle. She's not freelancing anymore, and neither am I. A lot of our friends still are. I mean, I'm still freelancing, but I'm also balancing that with basically a full-time teaching gig.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we understand that schedule, we understand that mindset.
Yeah.
We can talk to one another's friends, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about it doesn't have to be about music, or it doesn't have to be about dance, but there's sort of a general kind of creative artistic community amongst us that we find common ground. But I mean, I've always thought that maybe that was maybe I'm wrong about that. There was something about that was kind of Midwest in nature, of how we're just like, can be friends with everybody. At least it felt like it used to be that way. I'm not sure now, but it felt like it was that way, and you do anything that your neighbor needed, and likewise. And so, the idea of sitting down at somebody at a dinner party when you don't know them and just turning them and saying, "Hey, my name's Tom, what's yours? And how did you end up getting to this spot right now?" Just doesn't seem like a weird thing to do. And all of a sudden you've made a new friend, and you're having a whole conversation about it, I don't think I've ever really had a problem doing that. But I remember I had great teachers who also said, though, as musicians, like, you got to get out there and kill them with kindness, and I just took that to mean, oh yeah, be a genuinely nice person, and just talk to people, so I feel like that figuring that thing out has kind of worked out all right, just be able to talk to people and be friendly ask them about what they're doing and all that, and you could find something to talk about, and you can find something to groove on,
Yeah. I like doing that. A funny thing for me, being a woman, is, and growing up, I still feel like this in my mind, even though my body's getting older. But when I was younger, especially, I basically shared this point of view, and this is a funny thing to bring up, but anyway, I would talk to older people. I was genuinely like, wow, this is a person with a lot of life. Yeah, they've lived so much, It's not just like, oh yeah, they were an old person. No, it was like, oh, let me connect with this person and see. And the older men would be very funny about it, because they kind of thought, oh, this young girl's kind of interested in me. Which was just funny. But I mean, there was never a problem with it, but it was just a funny thing that was an outcome of doing that,
Yeah.
It was just cute. I like to talk to older people. I mean, and really get inside, their point of view, and see. Yeah, I mean, you and I are going to be there,
That's right. That's
And
right.
And if we don't do it to the older people, then probably we'll attract people who won't do it with us.
Oh, you get out of the universe what you put into it. So I believe in that wholeheartedly. So yeah, I mean, like, I love to talk to older folks. I mean, when my grandfather, my father's father, was getting up there when he passed, he was 88, I think. But about the last 10 years, when I'd get back to Wisconsin, I just always made a point to go down to his farmhouse and sit with him, and he just couldn't wait to have a beer with me, sometimes two. And we would just sit and talk. I'd be there for half a day, if not longer, and I would just listen to stories and stories and stories. And sometimes he'd tell me the same stories on the next visit, but one story in there that was different that I hadn't heard. But this was a man who had served in World War II, and was a Navy Seabee. He was stationed in the Aleutian Islands. They're building airstrips and docks and stuff, and unloading, offloading ships after the Japanese were pushed out, and like they were like loading and offloading Soviet Union vessels or Russian vessels.
Oh, wow.
played harmonica. He didn't do that by trade, but he played harmonica his entire life. That's probably why I ended up being interested in music, is because he had a polka band in Wisconsin that would play every family event, and I was fascinated by him playing the harmonica, and thought that seems cool. People seems to like, they clap for him. That seems neat, But he would tell me all these stories, and then I would go back and talk to my dad about it. And he would say, "I've never even heard that story." But I think there was a couple of us grandkids who invested that time. I know my cousin Danielle, who grew up in physical proximity close wise to him. She got to know him really well, and probably heard all those stories and more, because there were just a few of us who were like, just kind of went in, like just embraced it, get to know stuff that he had. And he just had some really incredible stories that, I might never would have known about him. And that's, I think, there's a lesson in there for just people in general. Like, you just never know. You never know what you might learn from this person by just asking him a couple of questions. Just be open about it. Be open. What's the worst that can happen? Rather be at a party and talking to somebody than just sitting there not.
Exactly. That's funny.
Yeah.
Let's see. We had another shorter one that I wanted to play. Wasn't it it was only 2 minutes. You guys at Vibrato, and Andy Langham, Will Brahm, Dan Schnell, and Edwin Livingston. There you go. And that was 2017.
More recent.
It's very short. I wonder why it's very short, man.
I didn't put the whole performance up. I think I put just
Oh, I see. Is this that's like a second part or something?
Yeah. That was the song for Jewel. Jewel's my wife, so I just
Oh,
kind of wrote something, and I kind of I don't know, as a writer, sometimes your ideas come from different places, and
yeah, sure.
I was just trying to do something kind of in the wheelhouse of Beatrice, and then kind of led me to that. So,
Sounded beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah.
It's fun to see these videos going back this many years and starting to think about how long I've been playing with those guys.
I know. I play with Edwin quite often. Actually, My last CD was this was Social Anthems Volume 1, and this was remakes of songs from 70s and 80s mostly, and with Anthony Wilson and Josh Nelson, Edwin, and Lorca Hart.
Dream band.
Yeah, it was just, it's just so good. But yeah, you can play anything and it sounds great. Yeah, there's so many wonderful players here in town. I hope you and I can play together too sometime.
Me too.
I would love to be inside the music with you. It'd be really nice.
I feel the same way.
Thank you. I was going to bring up just briefly that I guess Shep has been making mouthpieces.
Yeah, I mean, he has a joint company, and then they're with a partner. Yeah, and they're making mouthpieces.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm playing on several of their mouthpieces.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
I love them. They're great.
Interesting. Cool.
Their company is called Retro Revival Mouthpieces. So if there's any saxophone players watching this thing, go check them out. They're really good. They're sort of like, I think there's other interest in doing this, in the saxophone mouthpiece world, but it's like, kind of modeling vintage mouthpieces that nowadays are selling for thousands and thousands of dollars. It's really ridiculous, but they're doing a great job of kind of modeling these mouthpieces based on those original mouthpieces that we have sort of come to, worship. They're legendary,
I worship you.
Yes. So I love them. I'm really happy playing on them because they really play great. So.
Yeah. I love stuff like that. Have you thought of building old-timey music stands? No, Roland, those they don't even work well.
Yeah, and then you gotta go ship them.
Yeah.
Yeah. 40-pound, chunk of wood. It's like,
I know, and the new stands are so much better. They're light, they fold up into nothing.
I know.
And
eventually, we're not even going to need those anymore because we're all going to be taking our iPads to the gig and screwing it into a microphone stand.
Yeah.
And young people are going to look at a music stand and go, "What's that for?"
Yeah, or maybe we'll screw it into our head, and then, we'll just click, do something, and then it'll come up in some other part of the brain. That's scary, isn't it?
Start with contacts, right? You're going to put contacts.
Yeah. Oh, God. See, we just came up with something new.
Make a lot of money doing it, and we can just say the idea started right here. So how do we get our royalties on it?
Well, it's been 2 hours.
It has been, yes. It did.
See, I know, because we had the same conversation that I have usually in the beginning. 2 hours? How are we going to fill up 2 hours? And then it's like, 2 hours. Yeah, okay.
Well, it's been a real treat for me. Thank you, Cathy, for asking me to do this. And it was just nice to run into you at the Orchestra show and get a chance to visit with you there. And it was nice to see you in the audience. So to do this.
Thank you, Tom. It was really very nice to talk. And, this is the kind of conversation I like. It's about music. It's not all about me, and it's, thanks, Dan. Dan, my friend Dan Davila, he posts credits for people at All Music, so he has posted your credits, which is cool.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, so people can go look. Yeah, so it's been a great conversation, just the kind of I like. It's been very, very nice. Thank you so much for giving me 2 hours of your time.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it. Are you going to go back to teaching now?
Yep, I have a couple of lessons this afternoon, and I have my saxophone ensemble to direct this evening. So I'm in it for the long haul today.
All right. Well, listen. Have a great day. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too. Happy holidays in general.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to tell who's going to be on next. So if you want to stay, you can. But if you don't, it's totally fine. You can press leave the meeting.
I'm going to listen to this.
Oh, all right, cool. Well, tomorrow, actually, a guy you might know, JB Dias. So he is the, you should probably know him, Vice President of Education and Curriculum Development at the Herbie Hancock Institute of Jazz.
I would love to know him.
Yeah, he's a bass player too. And I think I saw him at Sam first. I met him through Larry Kuntz, I think. Might have been the night Aunt Maro was playing. I can't remember. But anyway, I met him and I thought, oh, he'd be an interesting guy to talk to, you know?
Yeah.
So he's on tomorrow. And then Wednesday, a bass player who used to live here, you probably don't know of him because he's another one of those great bass players who was here in the 80s, I guess, or something, Ed Bennett. And he lives up the coast. So, and he's played with a lot of great people, and he's really renowned in kind of a little bit older, straight ahead genre. And he's an educator as well. So he's going to be on. And then I'm going to Thursday through Sundays, I have my archives. So I only usually just do 3 live a week now, but sometimes I add people or change the time like we changed it with you. So Thursday is Lamont Van Hook. What an interesting name, right? He probably knows that great singer that you played with, whose name was Nayana Holly, because he's a background singer for a lot of people, and he's really great. I think he's the background, one of the background singers for James Taylor.
They probably know a lot of same people. They're on the same circles.
Yeah. He also has come out with a solo record of all things in country. So you don't see many African-American country artists, you know, solo, and especially people who have been really big in the background field.
It's happening now because that Country Music Awards that was just on, was that last week, 2 weeks ago? There's a lot of that happening. So
yeah,
finally breaking through.
Oh, thanks, Dan. A background for Phil Collins, especially. Yeah. And then Friday, this person is amazing. Clarice Assad. She lives in Chicago. She's Brazilian. She's a pianist and a vocalist and a serious composer and incredibly fantastic, like very spontaneously wonderful. Her father and his brother, I forget their first names, they're the Assad brothers, and guitarists especially would know of them. Very famous, worldwide famous. And so that's how she came up. She's brilliant, really brilliant. And that's Friday. Saturday, a singer here in town who I'm actually in the middle of producing his debut record. He's Pierre Chambers. He's Paul Chambers' son.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he has a very natural, you know, connection to jazz. I mean, that's why I wanted to produce him, because he's just so connected, you know. It's really nice. Really nice guy. And then Sunday, Gail Boyd, who is a manager. She manages John Clayton. I know you've played with some of those bands. You might have met her and didn't really know it. But she lives in New York, and actually she has a show on at 2:00 every day, where she gives the artist a half hour to just do whatever they want to do, talk about whatever, do anything. And it's really an interesting show, and you get to see a lot of people you've never seen before. So yeah, that's Sunday. And then and then we're moving on. We're going to do it again and again and more.
Congrats, Cathy. You're doing something great here yourself. You know, you're connecting people and offering, folks some insight into things they wouldn't know about these folks. It's wonderful.
Yeah. And I learned something today. I'm going to think about that more, man. Thank you for that information.
Anytime.
All right, Tom, you have a great day.
You take care.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Have a happy day and see you tomorrow.